This is Peter Hernandez, and welcome to The Core Truth. And today I have Mike Reddell with me. Mike,
Hey,
welcome.
hey, Peter. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely, Mike. And I was talking with Mike the other day, and we were talking about how agents can really hone their skill and perfect what they do. And as part of that conversation, we realized that some of our best experiences are from our toughest clients. And we can learn the most from them, the most demanding, the most exacting, the clients that, really hold us to the fire. And there's one, demographic of client that is absolutely, in my opinion, the toughest, and that is developers, Mike. And if any
I,
agent has ever worked with a developer, they know how demanding and exacting they can be.
yeah, and some of my clients, developer clients, actually pride themselves on being difficult. So it's
Well,
not
they
an
do,
accident.
but it's for good reason too, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't think agents really understand the pressure
No.
developers are under.
Frankly, Peter, I'm not sure I actually did, even though I had development clients for years before I actually, was an investor myself in a project. Even though it was a small amount of money, and in comparison, my perspective on everything really shifted because I could see sort of the whole picture more clearly, and especially the financial implications of things I otherwise would have asked the developer to do without hesitation. I I actually took a deep breath and considered my questions much more deliberately before I asked. Things like lowering prices or spending more money on marketing, for example, are two of the things that impact their bottom line. So I thought I had kind of knew everything about developers until I put my own money in play, and it was just a small amount.
Mike, you work in an area of our country, Dallas, Texas, that has a lot of development going on right now. So working with developers is a big part of your business, and you've always been keenly involved with them.
I have, Peter, it's so funny. I'll try to make this quick, but I think it's funny. I started out in sales and marketing in the medical device industry, and then I wanted to become really rich. So I quit and opened a software company in Austin, and well, I didn't become rich, unfortunately, but I learned a lot from that too. And then I sold that piece, moved to Dallas, and decided I wanted to be a real estate mogul, and
Hmm.
got my license. And not knowing literally anything about real estate other than I liked it, which I hear frequently from new agents. I, kind of set off trying to figure out a way to make money doing it. And I responded in my brokerage to in the old days, an all call. We wore beepers and all that kind of stuff in the old technology days, to an opportunity to sell a project. And this
Hmm.
developer was looking for sales agents to man it. So I, luckily I had a really structured, really comprehensive background in sales and marketing. So I approached it not knowing anything, like, holy cow, I can do research. So I drove to the construction site and checked it out. It was an area of town I wasn't really familiar with. I'd only been in Dallas for a little while. And I decided, so I saw people moving around, and I saw a guy who looked to me to be probably the construction manager. So I walked on the site, introduced myself, and told him that I was going to be talking to the developer in a couple of days, but wanted to know more about this project before I talked. And he was luckily gave me a hard hat and showed me around, and I went through the project from stem to stern, and did a lot of research after that on MLS, just pulling together data and so forth. What I was trying to do was show up at an interview understanding as much as I could about what the challenge was and
Hmm.
about the strengths and weaknesses of that particular project. So
Hmm.
he interviewed about, I think, somewhere between 10 and 15 agents. Apparently, I was the only one who did any research. So that made me feel good. And I got the job, but that kind of launched me into the development world, I think, as a function of kind of approaching the assignment in a different way. Because I think later he told me that no agent did any research at all. They just showed up and basically wanted the job because they had sold real estate for a while. And
Hmm.
I knew that that wasn't the way to win business in my other career in pursuits in both medical device in the medical device world and software. So that really bode well for me by doing the research. And then from then on, I just sort of built, I found my niche, which is development. And I kind of sort of built out a platform for that over time, which is,
Yeah.
been successful doing it.
It's interesting. I mean, you said you just walked in the project and you were handed a hard hat and taken on a tour, but I find that to be more the norm than the exception because developers and builders, they want agents to know about their projects. Trust me, that doesn't mean they're going to list with you, but they're
Right.
hoping you're going to bring a buyer. And so it's
Yeah.
real easy to get that walkthrough, I think, as a opening act. And so doing the research and being super well prepared is what's going to make you stand out and look different. You're very process oriented, Mike, and I think that developers expect a very strong process. We have a saying, good process gets good results. And talk a little bit about the process.
Well, I discovered I had to be process driven to work with developers because they are themselves extraordinarily detail oriented and process driven because a lot of things at risk. They've got investors that they want to keep happy. They have their own money at play. They have timelines. Their feet are held to the fire from the very beginning, from the time they take land down and so forth. So I sort of quickly came up to speed on how to create my own process that aligned with theirs. And in a sense, developers are professional sellers. So I had to, really improve my own game in order for them to look at me more as a peer or a colleague than, oh my God, the agent. Because most developers, frankly, aren't terribly impressed with the real estate world in terms of what they bring to the table. Because by and large, the thought that developers have, and many people, is that you put a sign on the ground and wait for somebody to call and you sell something. And it's really not we know differently, but that's kind of the reputation that we have. But nonetheless, and this has taken me years to develop a process so that at this point, from the time I engage on a listing pitch, I can kind of walk somebody through the high level of my engagement on a development. My relationship generally is much longer than with a single family home seller. My
Mhm.
engagement will likely be from 1 to 5 years. So I have to have all of that sort of timeline mapped out and how it synchronizes with phases of construction and so forth, and everything from the time they decide to take a piece of land down or thinking about taking a piece of land down to the time that people actually move in and
Mhm.
everything in between.
That's very, very interesting. Um, Douglas Elliman has a really, really good process for new development, don't they? I
I
think
do.
we are probably the go-to developer broker because of our process and experience. How has that helped you being with Douglas Elliman now in terms of your process, Elliman's process, helping you secure projects, sell projects? Has it been useful?
It has. The Elliman brand I was familiar with long, long before even Howard bought the firm. In fact, early on in my career, I was trying to figure out like where the best people in the United States were and what firm they were with and what could I learn from them even if I wasn't a part of it. So I went online and Elliman and Corcoran had the lion's share of projects. So I would go on, just look at the projects, read all the marketing material, try to figure out what I could glean from that I could then improve what I was doing and how I was talking about it. But also the availability of floor plans to read and so forth, just to understand, just to test myself. So yes, Element is, in my view, the premier development marketing group in the United States, without a doubt. So it's helped tremendously, um, being aligned with Elliman and speaking with developers, because most developers understand who Elliman is, even if they wouldn't, don't, they're from a market where Elliman has never been.
It's really true. How important is it to be a master or super knowledgeable of the market and the product that you're talking about? Is that something that you think agents maybe aren't that
Well,
Don't have that kind of mastery that's required, or and how do you develop the kind of mastery that's required, I guess, that a developer expects versus what maybe a normal homeowner would expect?
well, there's always, no matter how knowledgeable you are, that's one of the things I love about this industry. There's always something new to learn. And being a mastery of the product and the market, I think, is fundamental. So I'll give you a real quick anecdote. 2019, a guy came to work for me who was an accountant by degree and had that sort of the stereotypical accountant demeanor. Never sold a thing in his life, but he was really bright. Well, actually, 2018, he came to work for me, and he was a really great student, though. And I worked with him a lot on learning how to sell, and he was representing one of the developments that I had. It was about $150 million development. And long and the short of it is, he became so successful doing it. He became Rookie of the Year in the National Home Builders Association, which is unheard of. I don't think anyone in Texas had ever won it before. And it was the first time he'd ever sold anything, and he attributes his success to our training and also my emphasis on product knowledge, because product and market knowledge allows agents to relax. Because when you have something mastered, it's a lot easier to just get that, to just relax and be yourself and have a conversation with someone and focus on their questions and your questions to them and become interested in them and not worry and get, help stumble on something that's so simple that you have control of otherwise, which is product in the market. And
Mhm.
everyone responds to that. I mean, in my training with agents, I would tell them, you're going to sell three things. You're going to sell yourself, which is sort of establishing rapport, but you're going to, hopefully, over the course of a conversation, you will be able to establish yourself as the expert. So, not in a showy way, but just being able to demonstrate competence. And
Mhm.
demonstrating competence about the market is so critical, because that, and you can weave that into just about every possible conversation you have with a potential buyer or seller.
Yeah. What are some of the disciplines, I guess the multidisciplinary knowledge required with working with developers?
Well, and it's, I see it with a lot of great single family resale agents as well, that they have a command of and a working knowledge of construction. They have working knowledge and an understanding and a competence understanding architecture. They have they're able to walk through a house and quickly do in their head the quick high level math of what would it cost, do you think, unless we to redo a master bathroom or whatever, and understand, oh yes, well, if you added $150,000 in upgrades to this house, what do you think you could sell it for in 3 years based on your knowledge? And that
Right.
that kind of goes back to being a master of the market, because my honestly, Peter, my challenge was not only to understand what was happening right now, but my real challenge was try to understand how to become a better forecaster. Like,
Uh-huh.
where's the market moving to? What's happening with prices and why? And
Mhm.
really be able to support that by drilling down into knowing a lot of stuff. As neighborhoods gentrify, as trends are moving towards a different product type, square footage, and so forth. But the multidisciplinary knowledge, I think, in terms of construction knowledge, understanding architecture better by just basically spending your time and effort and learning more about it. I think that's critical. It's certainly critical if you ever try to pitch builder business or developer business, because the more you can actually be a developer yourself by understanding this, all these things we're talking about, the more respect you'll have and the more likely you are to be able to win the business. And the same thing is true, I think, regardless if you ever go after builder business or not. And it's all about, I think, at the end of the day, it's about how are you adding value to a relationship. And the more you know about these things, the more likely you are and the better prepared you'll be to help people, frankly, make better decisions. And I think that's part and parcel to what our challenge is as agents.
I completely agree. I think we have to continue to be students, continue to learn, and to continue to take that knowledge and then give it to our clients. I think it's so critical. A big part of our business, and especially with developers, is building good relationships. I know you're somebody that puts a lot of attention into the relationships with your colleagues, with your agents, with your clients. I mean, relationships are big for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they are. Thank you for saying that, and they are really important to me personally, but certainly also professionally. And the more deeply you are connected with people, whether it's personally or professionally, the more valuable you are because you have more resources. You have sort of a de facto team that you can rally to solve a problem. So, for example, when I'm with a client, whether it's a single family home person or a developer, I'm thinking well in advance about those relationships, like some of which are investors that I've worked with before, some of are buyers that I've had in the past, neighbors, professionals, designers, architects. I'm just trying to figure out how to marshal all of those relationships that are I've over years I've delivered a lot of value to and been fortunate to receive a lot of value from in order to help my client become successful. And part of it is if you're in the development world or you're selling a single family home, not being aware that relationships with other agents that are normally thought of as competitors is critical.
Mhm.
Because you have information in advance of something going to market where you may be able to uncover a buyer before you go to the time and effort of actually putting anything together on and putting it online and trying to
Mhm.
sell it. You could potentially sell it off market.
Mhm.
So relationships, whether it's the actual client, the developer, other clients who are competitive agents, past buyers, my entire sphere of other professional or personal friends, all those things are critically important.
I agree with you. You know, um, we were talking about in preparation for this call about being an expert of your listing. And I don't think, oh boy, this is controversial probably, but I don't think a lot of agents are experts of their listings. And the reason I say that is they, I don't think they always know the angle or the hook or that one and only
Mm.
reason you should buy this. And they certainly
Uh,
don't emphasize it in the presentations or in their marketing materials. And I really believe with every single property, whether it's a development or a single family home or a commercial property, there's always something unique about it. And that can even include tract homes, in my opinion. And so being able to find that uniqueness and to be the expert, as you say, of the property, I think is so key and critical. And I think developers, I mean, I've actually worked with clients where they've gone, oh, I never thought of that.
I 100% agree. So that's one of the things that I over time I had to. I mean, I didn't have an option. I mean, when I had a project that was, no matter what the value, but oftentimes they were really big, 150, 250 million dollars. I spent a lot of time trying to come up with a unique proposition that's based in reality, not just something that sounds good from a marketing perspective, but something that actually will resonate with the likely buyer for that product. And that's the other thing, Peter. Coming up with those unique propositions really requires you to understand and better predict who the buyers are for your whatever it is that you're selling and understand what's really important to them. And the way I became better at understanding that was engaging with buyers and past buyers as much as I could to really uncover what the most important things were for them in deciding to buy the particular thing that they bought from me. What else did they look at? How did they find it? What were the things that they liked the most about it? Now that they've lived there for a while, what are the things they enjoy now? What would they change about it? What are they looking for in their? I mean, just literally, I would make a list of questions that I would try to commit to memory. I don't know, 40 or 50 of them, and out of that 40 or 50, there's probably 10 or 12 that were my favorites in rotation that I would just in conversation. And the reason that I asked those questions was really in an effort to try to help better understand the mindset and the particular desire of the buying population to do a better job. Basically, the next time I had a project, not only of programming the development and helping shape the floor plans and amenities and finish level and all that sort of stuff, but
Mhm.
also to how that translated into marketing materials and how I could better articulate that
Mhm.
in the various ways. I'm sorry, I kind of got a little off track,
No,
Peter,
no, you hit
in
it
your
perfectly.
question.
And that leads to my next question is, or not my next question, maybe it's a statement, and you can just kind of fill in the blanks for me. But that is that, you know, one of the things I admire about you is that you are so curious. You go to school, you read a lot, you're constantly asking questions and trying to learn. And I think being curious is one of the keys to your success. And I'm just curious what that means.
Well, it means, I think, just being hungry to understand better, and disciplining myself to actually ask questions and just not talk. I remember early in my sales career, I'd have an interaction with a potential buyer, and it felt like it really went well. And then one of my bosses early on said, "You just talked the whole time. You didn't really ask any questions. So that's not really being curious. That's really spouting stuff off." So that's been a a lot of effort for me to transform myself into someone who is more curious. And now that I think I'm better at it, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy being more curious. So I'll give you an example. Here's a practical thing. So I'm going to list a house, and it's not a terribly expensive house in a neighborhood in North Dallas. And I'm constantly just driving around the neighborhood looking to see what's different, what's changing, and so forth. So there's an area in a park not far from this house, and I just saw that they were scraping something, and so I went up and talked to the workers, and I said, "What's going on? What are you guys building?" They said, "Oh, a pickleball court. We're gonna have 8 pickleball courts here." And I went, "Oh, that's good to know." So I would have never known that had I not stopped and asked the question. So now that I know that, that's going to be a really important part of how I bring this house to market, by knowing that in advance. And I don't know how many other agents are aware of it, but I like knowing it. So
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Interesting.
just an example. And I think I told you about, 2 days ago, that I was with the guy that's head of real estate insurance for his firm. And he said to me, you know, Texas is going to have a hard time with insurance in the next couple of years. And one of my favorite questions is, why do you say that?
Mhm.
It's just, I've found that for me, asking simple questions often opens the doors up to, where it's going to go. And when I said, why do you say that? Tell me more about it. He just went on with all kinds of information that I would have never known if I just hadn't have asked the question.
Right, right. So we have two more topics. I think they kind of tie into each other. The first one is, aligning interests, and finding win-win solutions, and the other is there's always a solution to the problem. So I see both of those conversations kind of tying together. And you're also saying, and I think this is so true, because it's always the real estate agent's default solution: lower the price. How open are developers to hearing that? Lower the price.
That's the cardinal sin in the development world, is to come to somebody and ask them to lower the price. And so I used to just think it was because the developers were just real jerks, and they were really stubborn. But really, the impact of asking a developer to lower the price goes it reaches way back, and to the very first moments that they're interacting with their investors, and then when they apply for a construction loan, and it's just, I mean, it's
The
the old,
profit
because
models,
no,
the way,
because what you're basically saying is, here's what they think. I mean, if you could crawl inside their head, they're probably saying this to themselves. You don't know what you're doing well enough, so it's going to cost me more money. So why didn't you tell me this earlier? I could have, done a better job of, I don't know, value engineering the project, or I would have spent less money on marketing, or whatever it is. It's never a pleasant conversation.
or they could be saying in their head, Mike, think about this. If I have to go back to my investors and banks with this news, they're going to have my head.
Yes, that's often that's what they're doing. And
Yes.
it also, when you're asking them to do that, versus a one-off single family home, they're also looking down the rest of their inventory that's still for sale, and they know that this is probably not the only impact that your question is going to have. It's probably going to impact the rest of their inventory or some way or another. So since I know that, like, price is a really always a sensitive topic, but sometimes it's the right answer.
Yep.
But if you start with price, you will probably never get hired again, because I used to tell developers that the last thing I ever want to do is come ask you for a price reduction, because usually there's another way to skin the cat. Not always, but usually there's another way to skin the cat. And I'm going to try every one of those things in advance of me coming to you. And I'll usually talk to a developer and let them know the other things that I'm trying to do, so we do not have to lower prices. And then I'm also trying to figure out a way to minimize the impact on that ask. So if I ask them, will you lower the price on unit X? What I'm going to do then is probably take it off the market, so that in Texas, it's a non-disclosure state. So I won't have that comp that's lower being visible to the public, which would otherwise cannibalize the rest of the prices. So there's a lot of workarounds to eventually lowering the price. Sometimes I'll raise prices on other things to sort of balance it, and not just so it pencils out better, but really as a function of my strategic understanding of how the pricing is balanced, and be able to articulate the advantages of one thing versus another. So therefore, they're more appropriately aligned in terms of price. But there's a lot of things. But alignment of interest goes to everything, Peter, in my opinion. And it's and in the development world, I've often thought there's a lot of disalignment, because you have these little silos of influence. You'll have an architect, you'll have a landscape architect, you'll have an interior designer. Sometimes you'll have an architecture firm for the interior. Sometimes you'll have a different firm for the exterior. You'll have the developer, you'll have his partners and investors, you have the bank, and then you have the realtor. And oftentimes those things are in conflict with one another. And that's one of the reasons I always ask to be a part of every construction meeting, because I wanted to know in advance what sort of things were being considered to value engineer, and where they were going to, what direction they were going, because I wanted to learn more about that. And I also wanted to have, if it was appropriate, to have an opinion on how it would impact sellability. So I wanted to get ahead of the problem. And I felt like that way I was sort of the developer's advocate at the table. Although the developer was also there, I knew a lot of things about how the decisions that they were making in construction might actually impact my ability to get a particular price and sales velocity. So I wanted to have a discussion about that. And I've learned that developers were, more often than not, really appreciative of it. And I felt like that was a way for me to help better align everyone's interests, really to affect the ultimate interest, and that's the ultimate client, which is the developer. So that was my effort. And then, kind of a more practical example of how I sort of look at marketing materials and strategies and stuff now that are even appropriate for the single family home world. And that is, in the old days when we had bonus to selling agent those old days when BTSAs were around. Some of that's coming back a little bit now. Anything where I felt like money spent and directed to an agent would help increase the probability of getting a sale at a particular price. And then oftentimes we would choose one thing or another. Oh, we're just going to offer a $10,000 credit to the buyer for upgrades or something, and then there wouldn't be anything for the agent. Or in other instances, oh, we're just going to offer a $10,000 BTSA because that's all the money we have, and then nothing to the buyer. So I realized a few years ago that maybe a better solution is a win-win. So maybe if it's 10,000, maybe split that money up and give 5,000 to the buyer and 5,000 to the agent. So you want all parties to be interested, not just one. You want all parties aligned. So I felt like that's helped me, just that understanding and coming to that perspective. I think it has really facilitated helping me get a lot of sales by shifting my my strategic direction on things.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on The Core Truth today and sharing your wisdom. I think for retail brokers, this is invaluable because all of this, technique and strategy that you've learned can be applied to any sale of any type of property with any type of client, and you will be that much better for it.
Agreed. And I'm happy to help no matter what market you're in. If you ever have questions, anything I can ever do to help with anything, I'm happy to do it. Just shoot me an email.
Fantastic, Mike. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And this is
Thanks, Peter.
Another edition of The Core Truth.
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you.